I'm down here just opposite of Little Round Top, which is the hill directly across from me, looking to the east, and off to the right hand side of that is Round Top. Round Top you'll see covered in trees. Little Round Top you can see the monuments up there and some visitors up there once I swing the camera around. But welcome for tuning into my live stream once again, folks. This is the 159th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg from the 1st to the 3rd of July 1863. The fate of the nation rested here at Gettysburg. Hey, welcome, Rebel Canners. Good to see you there. Yeah, so thanks to everybody for tuning in. Be sure to give us a like and smash that like button, folks, and feel free to leave a comment behind the video if you want. I'm gonna have a hard time keeping up with the chat, but I'll do my best. Just a moment, I'm going to turn around, just setting the stage for you, and then we're going to talk about the battle, and you'll be able to see it on the camera. So, this battle, there were 28,000 plus Confederate casualties, killed, wounded, or captured, and there were 23,000 Union casualties. So put that in your mind, folks. 28, 38, 48, 51, over 52,000 Americans died, were grievously wounded, or were captured at this single battle here in Gettysburg in central southern Pennsylvania. Yeah, just across the border from Maryland. Now, General Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, sought to take the war to the Union to end it quickly, because up to this point the Confederacy had defended itself except for one previous attempt when he had a battle at Antietam, and they didn't win that, and he retreated back in the Confederacy. So he thought he'd try once again to come up and bring the war to the Union and end it. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is that the Union Army actually advanced, or that Union Army, excuse me, the Confederate Army actually advanced far beyond Gettysburg. This was where the main body halted and engaged against the Army of the Potomac under General George Gordon Meade, who had just become the commander of the Union Army, just literally hours before this battle. The Army of Northern Virginia, over 75,000 strong, something like that I think it was stretched out from Maryland and Northern Virginia all the way through here in Pennsylvania and continued north. In fact, units from, I think it was a Jubal Early's division, that may have been his division, they advanced as far as Carlisle Barracks, where I used to work at the Army War College while still on active duty. And they actually burned Carlisle Barracks. They sacked it and took resources and provisions, and then they burned Carlisle Barracks. And that was just one element of the Army. That was the infantry that advanced that far. Cavalry units advanced all the way to the Susquehanna River to the west shore, opposite of Harrisburg. And advanced units of Jeb Stuart's cavalry actually were east of here, and they got into Dillsburg in York County and even a little bit further east of there. In Dillsburg, they left an IOU and provisioned all the resources from the local grocer there, left him bare, and left him an IOU. But since the Confederate States didn't win the conflict, I don't think they ever got compensated from the Confederate States for that. But that's the situation. And so 51,000 plus 52,000 casualties and captured here in a single battle. This was the high tide, the high water mark of the Confederacy. It's often called this battle. And why did Lee come up into Pennsylvania? Well, his army was desperate. They were outnumbered. The population of the northern states was 3 times that of the southern states, and a significant portion of the southern states' population was actually enslaved African Americans. So about 3 million slaves or something like that. So 1/3 of their population were slaves in the South. And that was manpower that by and large wasn't used in military uniform. That manpower was used to farm and harvest and things like that, and also to provide resources for the army, but they didn't serve in uniform. So, trying to figure out what's going on behind me there. Some people back there making a lot of noise. So, they needed to end the conflict quickly. By 1863, the war was over 2 years old. Despite victory after victory by Confederate forces in the East, there were a lot of losses along the Mississippi, and things were getting desperate. When this was happening, the Battle of Vicksburg along the Mississippi, Vicksburg, which nobody even knows about today, was a major, rather important port on the Mississippi for a long time, but the Civil War pretty much ended that. People were reduced to eating rats and tree bark, starvation when they were surrounded by Union forces in Vicksburg along the Mississippi. So that was going on while this battle was taking place here, and double blow to the Confederacy, losing Vicksburg and losing here. So the battles in the West went somewhat better for the Union forces, owing to a number of factors: more open terrain, also some better quality Union leaders, and not the better quality Confederate officers, perhaps one can make that argument. But also it was considered the main theater. So the main theater was here in the East, and the main absolute top theater was in Virginia and Maryland. That was with the Army of Northern Virginia under, not initially under Robert E. Lee, but it was eventually became his command, and he held that until late in the war. So Lee, of course, was torn. General Lee was an American. He was a general officer in the U.S. Army. He had served in the Mexican-American War with valor and distinction, and he was a very well-tested officer, a great leader. But he was first and foremost a Virginian in his mind, and when Virginia declared secession and left the Union, he decided it was time to resign his commission. That had to be an incredibly difficult decision for him. Now, before people start saying, oh, he was just a traitor, oh, he was just a slaveholder, oh, he was just that and the other, put yourself in the man's shoes. This is 1861. He's devoted his life to the Union, to protecting this country, which is expanding across this continent in manifest destiny from sea to shining sea. And he's fought in combat for this country. He nearly sacrificed his life. But remember that this country wasn't a century old, and we had fought for freedom from the United Kingdom to overcome tyranny from King George. So a lot of people, and including Lee, his father had served in the American Revolution, if I'm not mistaken, his father, yeah. Wasn't his grandfather, Light Horse Harry Lee. But General Lee and many people who resigned from the Army went and fought for the Confederacy, probably in some ways looked at this as impingement on their rights, and that's, they had a choice to make. Where are they from? So there were Southerners who fought for the Union in the North, and there were Northerners who went south and fought for the Confederacy. There were brothers against brothers in battle. There were Irish regiments at Fredericksburg against Irish regiments in a bloodletting that was epic. It was really something else, folks. The Civil War was incredible. And to see the distortions of history that take place today, the lying by these idiots that know nothing about American history, know nothing about strategy and tactics, know nothing about the history of slavery around the world, let alone the United States, and the fact that we're the only country that's ever fought a civil war to end the institution of slavery. Now, when people talk about, from the South that it was about states' rights, the leftists, the progressives attack them saying it wasn't about slave rights or about states' rights, it was about keeping slavery, that's what you wanted. But when people in the North talk about the war was about preserving the Union and ending slavery, no, it wasn't about that. It wasn't about that. It was just about preserving the Union. It wasn't about ending slavery. You can't have it both ways. Either it was ending slavery or perpetuating slavery. Or maybe it was a little bit of both. Depends on your perspective. But the bottom line is that the Civil War led to the end of slavery in no small measure because on December 6th of 1865, the 13th Amendment was enacted to the Constitution, one of the most precious amendments, one of the first countries in the world to ban slavery outright. We were beat by the United Kingdom and by Haiti, but very few other countries beat us. We ended slavery legally in our Constitution, not simply a law, not simply a dictate from a monarch, not simply a capricious decision from a legislature. We went through the process to ratify our Constitution. Now, we were helped in this in no small measure by the fact that the states in rebellion could not vote because they weren't in good standing. So it took very easy for 3/4 of the states to ratify, the 3/4 of the states' legislatures to ratify the 13th Amendment in 1865. It took a bit longer to get the 14th in 1868 and the 15th Amendments ratified, which ensured equal protection under the 14th Amendment and that they were citizens, those who were formerly in bondage, and then the other ones includes voting and things like that. So, but the 13th is one of the most important amendments in the Constitution, certainly after the Bill of Rights. It's right up there. It ended bondage for all people. Those people act as only black folks were affected by slavery. But anyway, whatever the case is, this war was fought to end slavery. The reason that secession happened, why Confederate states left the United States, was because Abraham Lincoln became president. Now, for those who are ignorant of history, not my audience, but for the progressive leftist hate wankers out there, the Republican Party existed for a single reason. One reason there was a Republican Party in this country, a single raison d'etre, reason for existing. That reason for existing was abolition. The Republican Party was formed in the 1850s with the sole goal of ending the institution of slavery. The first Republican president ever elected, Abraham Lincoln. And he worked to end slavery, and that's what he did. He ended slavery. Now, not in his lifetime because he was assassinated, but it did end on December 6, 1865. So for all those people who celebrate the fake federal holiday of Juneteenth, you have no idea what you're talking about. If you want to celebrate the end of legal slavery and bondage in this country, it's December 6, 1865. Don't distort our history. There are things to be proud of in our history. There are things to take shame from. But the people living today aren't responsible for those actions. Those came before us for the good actions, for the bad actions. They're responsible, and we've inherited their legacy. To lie about that legacy is to disgrace it. Seeing that Cornell University's library removed a bust of Abraham Lincoln and a bronze copy of the Gettysburg Address, or it was Emancipation Proclamation, whichever was very disturbing to find out today. Very sad to find that out. hopefully that'll be restored, but I wouldn't count on it because one single person complained. Why would anybody complain about Abraham Lincoln? What's your beef with Abraham Lincoln? Unless you're a bitter ender in the South and you think the South will rise again, why would you complain? It's just stupid. Anyway, folks, I'm going to swing the camera around now. We're going to take a look at some of the battlefield. Now, imagine this. Look at this hill. This is Little Round Top you're going to see. All right, so let me put this around here. All right, there you go. So off in the distance there in the camera, that hill to the left of that one single strand of grass that's blowing right in the front of the screen there, about 2/3 away over, that to the left is Little Round Top. To the right, covered in trees, is Round Top. They don't call it Big Round Top, they just call it Round Top. So Little Round Top is in front of us. This is one of the key parts of the battlefield. And you look at this going, how could that be part of the battlefield? Look at that hill. That's massive. Who would charge up that? Well, the Confederates tried to flank around it. And actually a lot of the battle took place here at the bottom of the hill and off to the right-hand side, which you can't see on the camera, an area called the Devil's Den. The Devil's Den was big boulders, rocks all over the place, hand-to-hand fighting, bayoneting, brutal combat, confused units. No one knew where the front line was. You know, you're getting attacked from the side and from behind on both sides of the battle. The Devil's Den was the vicious, horrible hand-to-hand, in-person, killing people face-to-face. That's where they happened. Not from a distance, firing a gun at them, a rifle, but up close and personal, killing people with bayonets and hatchets. And it was brutal. It was absolutely brutal. And epic fighting. General Hood from Texas and his Texas troopers were here, and they engaged over the Devil's Den, and they came back and reported to Longstreet that it was just brutal. It was unbelievable, because it was. To the right of Little Round Top, there's a gap over there. You can almost see where the trees, you see the grass growing on the hillside and then the trees behind it. There's a gap back there. If you look behind that twig of grass, which is, let me see if I can get in front of the camera here, right back there. See that? There's a gap back right in there. And that gap over there is between Round Top and Little Round Top. Now, the 20th Maine famously, of course, you know, Killer Angels by Michael Schirra heralds this fictional, historical fiction book. And then, of course, his son Jeff Schirra has written a whole series of books after that. But Killer Angels is the first one. And as a young officer, that was required reading. It's good reading. I don't know, they didn't have to make it required. I'm a historian. I didn't need it. But a lot of officers don't have that historical background. So Killer Angels tells the story of Little Round Top and the Battle of Gettysburg and the 20th Maine, led by Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, who used to be an instructor at Bodine College in Maine. Well, the 20th Maine had joined the Union Army. They'd raised their regiment. They'd been bloodied a couple times. They'd lost a lot of troops. Troops from another Maine regiment who had been mutinying and were just leaving the battlefield because their enlistments were up, although you can't leave until proper leave. So they were told they could do whatever they wanted with them, imprison them, do whatever. Well, Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain looked at these troops and said, you know, we're short. We need you all. Come in the battle with us. So Chamberlain was given by Colonel Vincent, his commander, who was shortly after that shot and died in combat. Colonel Vincent directed Lieutenant Colonel Chamberlain to the extreme left of the Union flank. If you look on that hill across from me, you'll see like what looks like a little castle tower. It's really hard to see on that screen, but there's a castle tower up there. And that's quite a ways over there, folks. But over there's a castle tower. That's a monument. Behind that, in those trees, about 200 meters behind that, directly behind that, is the edge of Little Round Top. Now, Chamberlain laid his troops out there. They got behind some rocks. They moved some rocks around, improvised positions. As an infantryman, you always improve your position. So they improved their position, and almost immediately as they were improving their position, a Confederate regiment, and I'm not sure which one, it might have been, there's an Emma regiment, but a Confederate regiment came charging up that gap there, that saddle between those two hills, into their lines. And the diminished, depleted 20th Maine shot and fought, chased them back. Well, these Confederate regiments, there were 2 or 3 of them, came repeatedly, and wave after wave after wave. And they kept trying to come up that gap in that saddle there. And what happened is that they were exhausted. It was July. The temperature was in the 90s. They're wearing wool uniforms. They've been marching endlessly days to come up here, and they're engaged in a combat where their friends and their neighbors and their brothers are falling around them. And Chamberlain is also in a desperate situation. He has no relief. No reinforcements are coming. He's very far. If his line collapses, because it was kind of an official shake, okay? So you've got the Union forces, the main Union forces are here, right? They're here along that ridge line. Oh, you see over there, Little Round Top. And then this hook comes over here like this, going backwards like that. That little fish hook is where Chamberlain's forces were. The Confederates were coming up a saddle like this. If they come behind Chamberlain and roll up that flank, they can go right down the top of the ridge behind Union forces and rout them from behind. That's why this was so critical, that fishhook. And Chamberlain had to hold, and the 20th Maine had to hold. Now, the last good thing that Ted Turner did for this country was produce the movie Gettysburg. He's a piece of slime. Other than that, but that was a great movie and really well acted with some incredible actors in it. And that movie, Jeff Daniels played Lieutenant Colonel Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain. It was an absolutely incredible movie. Anyway, so the only problem I had with it is Martin Sheen played Robert E. Lee, which I suppose makes sense because Martin Sheen hates America. So anyway, Lee didn't hate America though, but Sheen does. Leftist progressive turd. But anyway, so that fishhook, Chamberlain couldn't let that line fall, because from there you go down Round Top and you almost like run almost downhill to the main part of the Union forces down there towards Gettysburg itself. And it would have been just, the whole Union forces, a good chance it would have collapsed at that point in the battle because there were no reinforcements. So Chamberlain's troops were running out of bullets. They had no shot. They kept loading and recharging. The Confederate ships kept coming and coming and coming. So Chamberlain stuns his troops. They looked to him for leadership. You know, one guy's dead here, this guy's wounded and bleeding next to him. By the way, their battle positions, the rocks were lower than the rock sitting in front of me right here. They weren't even up to my knees here. They're crouching down behind that as Confederates came up. Just a little row of rocks there for some protection. And so Chamberlain, desperate, does what a leader does. He makes a decision in the heat of battle, in the heat of a challenge, and he makes a tough decision. And his troops think he's crazy. He gives the order to fix bayonets. Fix bayonets? You want us to charge into the Confederates? There's nobody behind us. There's no reinforcements. Why would we charge? That's crazy. Now, that wasn't the only crazy charge of the day. The 1st Minnesota led an incredibly crazy charge to plug a gap and were nearly wiped out, but they stopped the Confederate advance in Union Center on the 2nd of July. But here, at Little Round Top, Chamberlain says, fix bayonets. So his officers and NCOs look at him like, this guy's a nutter. And they fix bayonets. And he explains to him in the movie, I don't know what Chamberlain actually said because I wasn't present in July of 1863, but in the movie, the line that is used, which comes from Killer Angels, is that they got to be tired. The Rebs got to be tired. It's hot. They've been coming at us all day. They got to be tired. We got no choice. So they fix bayonets, and as the Confederates start their next charge up the hill, going up the hill, all of a sudden the screaming Union 20th Maine comes charging down the hill into their ranks. They're stunned, absolutely stunned. Many of them exhausted from multiple runs up that hill and then retreats back down in this humid, hot July weather. And the 20th Maine comes down that fishhook. They're here, they come down the fishhook and they swing like a trap door like this right in the Confederates, and then they capture a whole bunch of them, including the commander of an Alabama regiment, and they save the day. After that, the Confederate forces pull back and lick their wounds, and there you have it. Those are the two of the most amazing. We hear about the charge of the Light Brigade, of course, in the Crimean conflict, and that was something. That was a foolhardy thing. But here, the 20th Maine saved the day at Little Round Top, and the 1st Minnesota saved the battle in the Union Center. It was this close, folks. It was this close to the Union Army being routed. Now, that's a counterfactual because maybe they broke through and then maybe Union force was able to regroup. But the odds are, given the history of the Union Army and the Army of the Potomac up until this battle, they had been bloodied and beaten and retreated and beaten and bloodied and retreated over and over and over again. One incompetent, moronic general after another. And finally, a decent general that has his head together, has a plan, and that's George Gordon Meade. But of course, the soldiers in the battlefield didn't know that. They just know that every time they go to battle, the Confederates whip their asses. So a lot of the soldiers were like, this is crazy. This is crazy. But had they broke through in the 1st Minnesota, right in the center of the Union line, Confederates could have driven a wedge right between the logs, the logistics trains coming up to support them, because they're coming up the Taneytown road's that way. They're coming up the other road over here, with the Baltimore Pike, to bring supplies up, and they could have captured all these supplies, split the Union forces, and then fed more troops into that gap. Or here, they could have rolled up the flank and just collapsed the entire Union Army. And what would have been particularly bad for the Union Army is that the trains, the supplies, the logistics were coming up behind this hill a little further to the east. And if the Confederates had rolled up that flank, there would have been no troops between them and Washington. Think about that, folks. Virtually no Union regiments between Gettysburg and Washington. Had the Union flank been rolled up at Little Round Top, that little hill right across from me, had that happened in July of 1863, You can still see the hill. I can't tell if you, there we go. Had that happen in July of 1863, they could have consolidated that position, routed the Union Army, which would likely have fled not towards D.C., but towards Harrisburg to the north and east. Because the road to D.C. would have been blocked, and the road to Baltimore. And then those Confederate forces could have sent raiding parties and attacked and captured a largely undefended Washington, D.C. Can you imagine that? That's a counterfactual, but that's how history works, folks. That's how history works. Hey, 10 people here, some freeloaders. Give me a like on that. Give me a like on the video. It doesn't cost you anything but a moment of your time. Anyway, so let's get back on this side. Yeah, so Little Round Top. For me, it's heartbreaking to see people lie about America's history. We ended the slave trade, the importation of slaves in 1807, enacted in 1808 by an act of Congress. Before the country even went under the Constitution while we were under the Articles of Confederation, the Northwest Passage Act was enacted, and it banned slavery into perpetuity in the Northwest Province, which include the eventual Midwest states of Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Wisconsin. All of those states, Illinois, became perpetuity, no slavery. Slavery is illegal. In 1787, ladies and gentlemen, 1787, the country was 11 years old. Now, you're going to say, okay, Chris, but that didn't end slavery. You're right. But people have, rose-colored glasses and evaluate and comment on history as if the mores and values of today were in fashion in 1776 and 1787. The world was full of slaves. Virtually every country in the world had slaves in 1776 when we declared independence, and 1787 when the Constitution was drafted. But what the Founding Fathers did is they created a document that could be amended on the hope for an eventual outcome that all men are created equal by their Creator. And among them, we have certain inalienable rights. Among them are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness for all men. Men are men and women. For you radical feminist lunatics out there, it's a plural term for humanity. So they created a system that could be changed. And the change began already before the Constitution was even ratified. 1787, we already stopped at ending the institution of slavery before Great Britain did. No one ever gives us credit for that. Now later, we had all kinds of political compromise. But people forget that in order to have the Constitution go into effect, to replace the Articles of Confederation, which were a failed document, we had to have 3/4 of the states ratify the Constitution, their legislatures. 3/4. Now, with 13 states, which were colonies previously, you are going to find it very hard to get small states with small populations that are not wealthy to agree to a constitution unless it meets their needs or desires. At that time, southern states preferred to retain slavery. And in fact, there were slaves in the north. There were slaves in Pennsylvania, slaves in New York, slaves in Maryland. Yeah, there were slaves up here. People forget that. That wasn't banned. Slavery didn't end in Pennsylvania, in New York, in Delaware, in Maryland, in New Jersey until December 6, 1865. Not with the Emancipation Proclamation. That was simply a war measure meant to cripple the Confederacy by stealing its labor force. A clever measure by Lincoln, but it didn't end slavery. So the celebration of Juneteenth is an abomination. We should be celebrating December 6th, 1865. That's the truth, and that's the history of this country, not this bullshit, leftist, progressive, self-pleasuring, hate-wanking nonsense that we hear from each day. So, there you go, folks. You would not have had small states like Maryland or Connecticut or South Carolina agree to join a union in which it was dominated by a small number of states. And that story is no different in 2022 than it was in 1787. In 1787, Massachusetts, New York, Virginia, and Pennsylvania were where the bulk of all Americans lived, where the bulk of the wealth was, where the bulk of the resources were. Those 4 states. The rest, the other 9 states, would never have joined a union unless they had representation. Hence, the bicameral legislature, in which we have every state represented equally because states are equal. Whether you're tiny Delaware or you're massive California, your state is just as valuable in our federal system. Hence, you get 2 senators. California has 2 senators. Delaware and Wyoming have 2 senators each. Wyoming has 1 member of the House of Representatives because that is the people's house, and it's based on population. So California has close to 50 members in the House of Representatives, but they're losing because of the latest census. people leaving that corrupt state. So they get all those representatives in the House of Representatives. They have an inordinately large vote in the junior chamber of our legislature, the House of Representatives. But in the senior body, the body that's the check and balance on the executive branch and on the judiciary, the Supreme Court and the federal judiciary, the Senate, equal representation. 50 states, 100 senators. Case closed, boom, no argument. And that's why the senators, until we had a constitutional amendment at the beginning of the 20th century to change our constitution, the senators in our first century of history were selected not by voters, not by you and me. We didn't select the senators. If there was a senator for Minnesota in 1870, you didn't pick him, and your great-great-great-grandfather didn't pick him. The state legislature picked our senators because it was the senior body and represented the states. So when you hear morons, failed bartenders who can't pay their tab, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, by the way, I don't want to sleep with her, just in case she's curious. When you have idiots like that, and Pelosi lying, and Chucky Schumer, and all these other fools that know nothing about what they're talking about, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Maxine Waters, completely clueless buffoons, just basically, you know, better gift of gab, used car salesmen, and ambulance chasing lawyers become members of our government. When they tell you stuff about the government, they don't know what they're talking about. They have no idea what they're talking about. When you hear Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez say that the Supreme Court's decisions this week were illegitimate, what planet is she on? The Senate had an opportunity to check the executive branch by denying their nomination to the Supreme Court. Checks and balances, folks. That's why the Senate is the senior body of the legislature. But anyway, let's get back to Gettysburg. That's enough of that political science lesson. So here at Little Round Top and Round Top, there wasn't really any fighting on Round Top. It's mostly on Little Round Top. And you got Devil's Den down here. Pretty exciting stuff here, folks. Amazing. What I'm going to do before I wrap up the live stream is I'm going to get up and I'm just kind of walk around a little bit and give you some views of the area in case you want to see it, okay, before we wrap it up. And then we'll wrap up the live stream here shortly. Be sure, if you got any questions, to just post them, and I'll do my best to answer them. I've still got another broadcast tonight when I get home. I've got USA Eagles versus the French Barbarians from Aviva Stadium in Houston, where I was at a few weeks ago covering the final game of the Major League Rugby season. Unfortunately for Houston, they lost to Austin in that game. But they did host the playoff game 2 weeks after that. Anyway, the eventual champions were, of course, Rugby United from New York. But I will be covering that tonight live on Rugby Ascendant, and you guys can tune in. By the way, Rugby Ascendant is now monetized. You want to become a paying supporter for the channel to help finance the coverage, you know, going to Rugby World Cups, including the Sevens World Cup in Cape Town, the 9th to 11th September. I'll be in South Africa for that. The Women's World Cup in New Zealand, unless I have to prove that I've got 70,000 jabs, then they can shove it up their rectum, in New Zealand in October. And then the Rugby League World Cup in England in the Midlands in November. So any money raised on that channel will go towards paying for that and help support rugby broadcasting. Anyway, folks, give us a like on this channel if you don't mind. It doesn't cost you anything but a moment of your time. Hit that button right down there. Okay, what I'm gonna do now is kind of walk around, give you a little better view of what's going on here. But for me to do that, so you don't see me getting up and being all awkward here, let me turn the camera back around. Okay, so there's Little Round Top. And there's the rock that I've been in front of. Let me get I don't want to forget my stand here. So there's Little Round Top over there. And I'm opposite of it here. So we're going to walk around. There's a few monuments and plaques placed here for different units. You can see it's quite brutal terrain. Imagine going up that hill, trying to climb that hill in the summer when it's 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 36, 38 degrees Celsius, wearing a wool jacket after having marched 100 miles in 3 or 4 days in July heat. So this was the Army of Potomac 5th Corps' 2nd Division, 1st Brigade. Colonel Hannibal Day. We're going to come over here and you'll be able to see the Devil's Den from an angle in just a moment. These are all the Army of the Potomac monuments here. The Army of the Potomac pulled back over there. So. All right, there you can see the cut in the saddle where that car's driving up over there in the far distance. Now I caught a break here. The sun has been buried by rain clouds for the moment, and the temperature's dropped. It's really nice. Much better deal than the soldiers had here in July of 1863. It was quite brutal for them. But I'm going to point out where Devil's Den is at here. Okay, it's around that little hill. You can see monuments. There's the cut that runs through Round Top. That's Round Top right there, with all the trees on it. No fighting really took place over there, just maneuvering. And then this is Little Round Top over here, which is slightly lower and has all the vegetation off the front. And the Union troops were on the top of that ridge line up there and ran down this side over here. And the Union line ran all the way across, straight down there, back into Gettysburg. So if we come back over here, right down there, over there is where the Devil's Den is at. I'll take some pictures and I'll load them up and I'll post them on the channel. If you see those pictures, you're going to see what a horrific spot to fight a battle. It was truly brutal. And just get a feel for that. You can see all these rocks around here. I mean, they didn't import these rocks. They're laying around the field. This is not exactly prime agricultural country, this portion here. But look over here, you can see some of these big rocks. And picture that. There are big boulders where Devil's Den's at, where these guys fought hand to hand. Absolutely incredible. So you could drive around the Gettysburg National Military Park. There are designated routes and there's some one-way roads. It's really well laid out. Unfortunately, this year I noticed that a number of places on the battlefield have been fenced off. They're trying to preserve them. So like for instance, the 1st Minnesota used to actually be able to walk out into the field where they did the charge. And I've done that before, but this year it's all fenced off. It's kind of disappointing. There's a monument down there. I've never seen that one. Let's go check that one out. You guys up for that? I'm gonna climb over the fence here. Oh, that's what I just went over there. A little rocky fence there. I don't know what this monument is. I've never ventured down here. Hopefully I won't pick up any ticks on my way down here. And hopefully the signal stays good because I'm getting down into a little gully here. And I'm reliant on a mobile signal, so hopefully it's still good. If it starts to fade, I'll rush back up the hill. So let's see what this one is. Ooh, these weeds itch. I'm in shorts. You can see the nature of the rocks down here. Army of the Potomac 5th Corps, 2nd Division, 2nd Brigade, 17th U.S. Infantry, 7 companies under Lieutenant Colonel J. Durrell Green commanding. Arrived in the morning and took position with the brigade on the right of the 12th Corps. Later moved to the left and at 5 p.m. formed line with the brigade to the right of Little Round Top and advanced across Plum Run to the crest of the rocky wooded hill beyond near the wheat field. That's just behind here. Under severe fire from the Confederate sharpshooters on the left and then facing the left regiment with the brigade occupied the stone wall on the edge of the woods. Boy, that's a mouthful. The Confederates having opened fire on the right and advanced in the wheat field in the rear, and the brigade was withdrawn under heavy fire on both flanks and from the rear. You're getting shot at from the front and the back and both sides? Well, that sucks. Man. They formed in line to the right of Little Round Top, having been engaged for about 2 hours in combat. On July 3rd, they remained in the same position. There were 25 officers present, 235 regular soldiers. 1 officer killed, 24 men killed, 18 officers wounded. So 19 of the 25 officers were killed or wounded, and 105 men missing. Whew, man, that's crazy. It's crazy. So you can see just kind of the nature of the terrain here, folks. You guys still with me here? All right, we're going to walk back up to the top here. Now, going to Devil's Den is just too far. It's a bridge too far. I can't walk there and carry the phone. So we're going to wrap up the live stream here shortly, but I want to give you this. Now, tomorrow, I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but I'll consider trying it. Tomorrow, the reenactors are going to reenact the 1st Minnesota's charge into the center of the Union line to plug a gap, which stopped the battle from being lost. That should be interesting. So if I'm able to do it, I'll try to get back down here to Gettysburg tomorrow. Okay, it's time to climb over the fence. Now, I'm not wearing wool or crappy leather boots, so that was pretty easy. Whew. And there you go. So as you go throughout here, throughout these woods, there's monuments and all sorts of things around here, plaques to different units. So let's take a look over here real quick before we wrap up. I urge everyone, if you live in the States, to come here. It's worth seeing. It's one of the best battle sites ever preserved. 10th U.S. Infantry, 3 companies under William Clinton. William Clinton, not William Jefferson Clinton, just William Clinton. Colonel Sidney Burbank. The Bucktails, I guess that was their nickname. And on the side here, they have all their battles that they were at. So, yeah, these are sprinkled throughout this trail down here. There's a path you drive in the car. It's not really for walking. So, in Gettysburg. Usually it's quite brutal right now, but this is, for the moment, quite tolerable with the temperature having dropped. These clouds coming in. It was like earlier today. It's a pretty heavy rainfall over towards Lancaster, and then a bit further northwest before you get to Carlisle earlier today. Whoops, let me get across the road before I get run over here. Now I come here repeatedly because, you know, I'm only about a half hour away, but I usually come here every 4th just to commemorate these events, when I'm in the States, that is. So you can see some artillery pieces down there. A lot of water down there, see that? All right, folks, I'm going to wrap it up here. That's the end of this live broadcast. Thanks a lot. Be sure to give us a like, smash it if you don't mind. And we'll catch you a little bit later for USA Eagles versus the French Barbarians. Predictions? I don't know how to predict tonight. I don't know who's playing for the French Barbarians. Probably some no names. We'll see how it goes. The Eagles, they're rusty. This will be their first time on the pitch this year as a team. And they had a very bad season last year, so we'll see how it goes. I haven't talked to Gary Gold, the head coach, but I will be interviewing him sometime soon. Now, bear in mind, for the Eagles, they have 2 important matches coming up. The 9th of July in Santiago, Chile, which I was hoping to go to, but Chile has moronic COVID restrictions still. You've got to, you know, have sex with a goat, dance 3 times to the moon, have 87 jabs in your arm, and then have private separate insurance beyond your medical insurance to prove that they'll cover you for COVID in Chile. What are the odds of finding a medical care here in the States that will cover you for COVID in Chile? 0 to none. So I won't be going to Santiago, even though the flight was affordable. And I'm probably not going to go to Glendale, which is where they come back on the 16th, because that's the same day that the Premier Sevens rugby tournament taking place at Audi Field in Washington, D.C. So I'll go down to that most likely and cover the Sevens tournament down there with live broadcast on Rugby Ascended. Anyway, folks, thanks a lot. There's a few chat messages came in. What was that? So, you're welcome. All right, guys. Cheers. Take care, and we'll see you later. God bless.